republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Falcone? Here. Francisco?
Here.
Horton?
Here.
House?
Here.
Schneider? Here. Williams? Mayor Bloom. Item number 1, proclamation declaring September 26, 2009 as Mesothelioma Awareness Day.
Anyway, that's what I will do. We may be going too fast here. Are you? Yeah, oh, there you go. Thank you. Hi, Marty Bloom. I'm going to read the proclamation then if you have it. Thanks for coming. No, you can stand right there. You get to be on TV. Maybe I'll make you more nervous. This is Mesothelioma Awareness Day. Approximately 3,000 Americans die each year from mesothelioma. Am I doing okay? An aggressive cancer of the lining of the lungs, abdomen, heart, and testicles. The heavy use of asbestos in manufacturing, industry, and construction has been recognized as the worst occupational health disaster in U.S. history. Exposure to asbestos for as little as 1 month can result in mesothelioma 30 years later. Asbestos was used in the construction of virtually all office buildings, public schools, and homes built before 1975. A high percentage of all mesothelioma victims were exposed to asbestos on naval ships and in shipyards. It is believed that many of the firefighters, police officers, rescue workers from Ground Zero on 9/11 in 2001 may be at increased risk of contracting mesothelioma. For decades, the need for research to develop effective treatments for mesothelioma was overlooked, and as a result of this neglect, treatments available today generally have only limited effect, and most patients succumb within 12 to 15 months from diagnosis. In 1999, Mesothelioma Applied Research Foundation was formed to eradicate life-ending and vicious effects of mesothelioma, and early progress in developing effective treatments for the disease is now being made. So as mayor of this beautiful city, I hereby proclaim September 26, 2009 as Mesothelioma Awareness Day. And it's to raise public awareness for this disease and for the need to develop effective treatment and research for it, I'm sure. So thank you so much for raising our awareness. And there you go.
Thank you for this proclamation on behalf of the patients and all those who have been exposed and inevitably will be exposed by asbestos that's in place. Hopefully we can cure this disease. Thank you.
Thank you. I just don't think we knew what we were doing. I remember sitting in grammar school and seeing the pipes wrapped with this stuff, and I know that was not good for you. Oh, well. It was good for the pipes, maybe. That's true, but not for my pipes. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. We do grow as a community. We learn more. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we have some public comment. We have 2 minutes each. We'll start with Phil Walker, to be followed by, Kate Smith.
Getting better all the time. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Clicking on all 8 right now. I'm going to exercise my civil rights today, constitutional rights, and endorse a candidate for City Council. We've got a fire that was spotting a mile ahead of the main front, burning in the Somas Moore Park, Fillmore area right now. There's another one burning down near Norco. I truly believe the long-term trend is dry. You know, every time you open the paper or look at the television, there's an extreme climatic event that's going on with the flooding in the southeast right now. Doesn't matter whether it's fire, flood, earthquake, tsunami, we'll throw that in. We're all on borrowed time. It's just not if, but when. And I think emergency preparedness should stand at the forefront of city planning. The gentleman that I'm endorsing is Harwood Bendy White. His background, I was really surprised hearing him talk about emergency preparedness, but he's extremely well versed in it. since the Coyote Fire. When I initially came to Santa Barbara in 1964, it was September. And I guess the Harwood property was all burned around over, and I don't know if they lost any structures, but at that point he really started thinking about the whole wildland fire scenario. Going through the previous drought, 1985 to 1991, Mr. White served on the City Water Commission, and he was just at the forefront of things. He thinks in depth through everything, and very methodical, but he's very measured, and he's just got a wealth of expertise. He also has just a varied experience of, 8 years on the City Planning Commission. And those three things tied together, I think he has invaluable experience to offer this city and the council. So I would wholly endorse Harwood Bendy White for City Council.
Thank you. Boy, that was
You.
right on the dot. That was
And
very
it's
good.
just not if, but when.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor.
Kate Smith will be followed by David Daniel Diaz.
Madam Mayor, members of the Santa Barbara City Council, I too would like to support a candidate for City Council, Crucito Herrera Cruz. Cruz was born and raised in Santa Barbara. He graduated from the University of California, Santa Barbara, went to law school, and has been an activist for social justice his whole life. He's been a well-known advocate for youth in Santa Barbara, and his experience being labeled and abused by the justice system gives him a perspective that we need to support. He speaks English and Spanish articulately, eloquently. Interesting enough, Cruz suffered the same fate as I did. He was disqualified from a ballot, not once, twice. Ia Falcone was also disqualified by your voter registrar. Your voter registrar doesn't even have a website so that the city of Santa Barbara can look online and find out who is running for the city council and for the mayor. Some pretty important positions. They can't even find out, there are no polls. It's a mail-in ballot. On his own, Cruz was able to get his reversal from Judge Lafferty. But the incompetence, I won't go into the corruption, but the incompetence of your voter registrar has cost him dearly.
Okay, your
He
time
wasn't
is up.
allowed on the panels, and I'm asking that the city council find a way to
Thank you.
restitute the time.
Thank you.
lost.
I just want to make sure we note that the judge said that the city clerk had done nothing wrong at all. That what they did is they saw the updated signatures, and he then said, "Okay, you can come." So that's all.
Right, but I'll
David
bet
Daniel.
you Ia Falcone wishes she had not listened to her
We're
lawyers.
done. Thank you very much. David Daniel Diaz, followed by Gert Walter. I think there must be an election somewhere. That's all I'm figuring out here.
Maybe so. Good afternoon, Santa Barbara County Board, Mayor. The hydromulch thing has been really bugging me a lot. I think it's kind of silly. My first fire was the Coyote Fire when I was 10 years old. I saw it every night, live and commercial-free from my front porch. It was so cool. Wondering which fire was going to go faster, the one going uphill or the one going downhill. I want a few candy bars for a couple of nights. It was kind of cool. But I noticed some of the hydromulching that's going on in the fire area. It seems like they're putting it down in areas that are almost far back enough to where it really isn't going to help one way or the other. But when I was a kid, I used to put oil on a slope on a hill and then I'd put water on it. And for some reason, it went faster. And someone in Seattle said the same thing happens with the hydromulching after a certain point when it becomes saturated with so much water. So something to consider and something to think about as far as our taxpayers' monies are being spent, because I think it'd be better in someone's retirement fund. But that's my hang-up. And the other thing is, the SCO card is Doss Williams is still the only person who's interested in seeking relief for the signage in restaurants. A lot of people have confronted me in the street and they said, hey, you mean the landlord the landlord of the property has to pay $300 too for the second violation? And I go, yeah, the store owners are considered crank junkies, unfit social misfits, and now the city's trying to do everything to encourage the landlord to get rid of them because they're not conforming to codes that can be flexed and altered and changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gert Walter will be followed by Karen Putnam.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address you. You're 7 very special people. I commend you for the responsibility you've taken on and the hard work you do trying to solve all the city's problems and take care of all of them. And I know it's a tremendous task. And because it is, I want to, you probably ought to have 17 elected to the council, not just 7. But that might create more problems than it's worth. So,
No kidding.
so
I'd have to herd
suggest
all of them.
we get help from
No.
a different source.
City administrators doesn't think that's a good idea.
We get help from a different source, and that is seeking it from the Almighty. And I want to lift you up in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for these 7 people. We ask your blessing on them. We ask your guidance, your power, your direction as they attempt to tackle the problems of this city. And we know the problems involving people are sometimes intractable. They're very difficult to solve. And Lord, we just ask you to intercede and give them wisdom and discernment in being able to deal with these issues. And Father, we pray that you would bring your presence into these council chambers and help them to see the light of your love dealing with the people they're involved with. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
So Karen Putnam, you're saying you're representing Art from the Heart. So is that for the arts grants? Yes. Okay, well, that's not for this. So this is for the open, this is for things not on the agenda. So I'll put it over here and call on you then when we have the arts grants, okay? Maria Ross, followed by the last speaker would be Gina Carvalho. I do it better without seeing it.
Good afternoon, the Honorable Marty Bloom and the members, distinguished members of the council. This is my first time speaking before you, and I'm very nervous. But I'm going to push through this really quickly. And it's really unfortunate that the first time I get to speak to you, I'm symptomatic. I was released from my most recent psychiatric hospitalization on last Thursday, Vista Del Mar. Prior to that, I've been in probably about 7 different psych wards in at least 3 different counties. That would include Los Angeles County, Santa Barbara County, and one other county, I think it's Bakersfield or something. They kept me in ambulances, driving me all throughout the whole community. And it was extremely costly, not just for me, emotionally, to be switched to all these different hospitals with different doctors, but it was extremely costly for the county as well. But that's not your issue, I don't believe. I don't think you can really have that much influence over county mental health and where they choose to place people. But I did want to mention it because it is affecting my ability to speak before you in a very clear and concise manner, which is the way that I'm used to talking to people when I practice law. My background. I am an entertainment lawyer, most recent training, and prior to that, I was a tax lawyer and a commercial real estate lawyer. And when I was a tax lawyer, I worked for the United States Department of Justice in the tax division, and I had a high security clearance. I'm licensed in 3 states, California, Massachusetts, and the District of Columbia, and I have 3 requests and then a beg. 3 requests and a beg. The first request is that I'm having a little get-together at my home on Saturday, September 26th from 2 to 5, and I've extended an invitation to all those liberal candidates who are interested in speaking at the thing after their, I think it's called the Women's Democratic something or other at the library prior to coming to my thing. And so I wanted to extend that invitation. It's also the grand opening of the satellite office of Synergy Entertainment Group. And I sent business cards and resumes to each of you so you would know what that was. And so my request is that you guys try to come. My second request is that we possibly get some sort of proclamation about mental health.
You see, you're out of time.
Okay. And the third request is that I'm interested in opening a restaurant in a few years, and I want you guys to get to know me in connection therewith. And then my beg is that if anybody can assist me in getting hospitalized, I'm in a medical emergency. I may not appear to be that way, but I am. I need to go to the hospital again and stay until I'm well, and I beg of you to influence whomever you can concerning just that. Maria Ross, R-O-S-S. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina Carvajal will be our last speaker. Hi, Gina.
Mayor Bloom and members of City Council, thank you very much for listening to me today. I come to invite you and inform you about our annual Suicide and Violence Prevention Forum that we're holding this year on October the 8th at the Marjorie Luke Theater at 7 p.m. And the goal for doing this year is to address both the issues of suicide prevention and awareness and the resources available to deal with suicide, but also gang violence. I brought J.P. Herrera with me, who will be one of the people speaking. I have speakers from Homeboy Industries of Father Boyle's Los Angeles organization, Akila Shirelles, who did the peace treaty between the Bloods and the Crips, and Mariette Hartley, who's a suicide survivor and actress. So what we'd like to do and invite each of you to come to is to just attend, show the support to the community for what we can do in terms of suicide awareness and violence prevention. And I brought brochures and pamphlets. And also Pedro Nava will be here to speak this year too. So it should be a very rewarding and, I think, very powerful evening. So thank you very
and
much.
That's on
It's our
October
15th
8th.
year. Yeah, it's October the 8th at 7 o'clock at the Marjorie Luke Theater. So
Okay.
thank you very much for your time and all of your support, because I think everybody on council has been supportive of our work. Thank you very, very much.
And thanks for your work, too. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment section. We have, on the consent calendar, we have some items for you to read without, by title only, without reading all of it.
Item number 3, adoption of ordinance pertaining to amendments to Municipal Code Title 17 regarding waterfront policies. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Title 17, Section 17.20.005, 17.20.220, and 17.20.265 pertaining to operations at the waterfront.
Okay, that's reading by title only. We'll waive further reading unless there's some objection. Anybody want to take anything off the consent calendar? Seeing no one, can I have a motion, please?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, item 8. You were right to be here early.
Item number 8, Trust for Historic Preservation Downtown Campus Update.
Okay. Mr. Bossy, are you going to start us off here? Or...
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and agency board members. My name is Brian Bossy, and I'm with the city's redevelopment agency. And the item we have for you today is a presentation by the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation and their interpretive planning consultants, Metaphor. And rather than waste any more of your time, I'll send it right over to Mr. Gerald Jackman and the consultants, and they can take it from there.
Okay, Dr. Jackman.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing us to make this presentation today. I'd like to thank Brian for arranging it and Tony Ruggieri for helping us with the tech. Through an MOU and a joint powers agreement, this Trust for Historic Preservation, state parks, and the city have a long-standing partnership. This partnership has been a major success. The city has provided funds for acquisition, archaeology, construction, and not to mention use of city equipment on occasion. All the beams for the chapel were through the help of your equipment, putting them up there back in the 1980s. It has worked closely with the Trust through the Landmarks Committee Commission to advance our various projects. We are here today because of the city's participation in preserving and protecting our town's historical resources. What you will be seeing today is possible because of 40 years of groundwork that we have done together, that is, between the Trust, the city, and state parks. The Presidio is an international project connected not solely to our city, but to our state's history as well, and also to Spain and Mexico. It deserves a museum interpretive plan of the highest quality. Thus, thanks to grants from the Outhwaite Trust, which is here in Santa Barbara, and the California Community Foundation, we have retained Metaphor, one of the leading European museum design companies based in London. Before I turn this over to them, I do want to mention just a couple of other things. The Trust is having its 4th annual Tapas Vino Arte this Saturday, and I've noticed that some of you have signed up, and I hope that the rest of you will be signing up for that as well. It's at the Casa de la Guerra this Saturday at 3 o'clock. And I just heard news this morning that we have received a $150,000 grant from the Hine Foundation that's located in San Luis Obispo to help us build the defense wall behind the northwest corner. And in these hard times, getting grants of that magnitude is really significant. So we're a bit on the roll. So Ann Peterson is here. She's our Associate Director for Historical Resources. She's been working with Metaphor. She's not going to speak today, but she's the one who's been coordinating it. She recently finished her PhD at UCSB and has been working for the Trust for a number of years. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Stephen Greenberg of Metaphor. He's the principal, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his company and a little bit about what he's been doing for the Trust. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Greenberg. Desk was not made for a computer, but oh well. There you go. You fit it. Okay, good.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, councillors, this is new to me. Thank you all very much for, it's a real privilege to be able to present to you the findings of our work very directly. I'd like to thank Dr. Jackman and Dr. Peterson, and also Mr. Chapin from the State Park, California State Park, because they've been incredibly helpful. This is a combined work. It's not just me, but I'm, as it were, speaking for the project as a creative director. Just a word about my company. Our company, we specialize in the planning and design of museums and heritage sites and historical landscapes. We're based in London, and we work in lots of different countries. So I wouldn't say we're just European-based. We work with World Heritage Sites and national museums, and I believe this is very relevant to our work here. In Istanbul, this site here, which you might know as the Seraglio there, we've done a master plan recently, an interpretive plan for the Topkapi Palace area, where 3 cultures over 2,000 years have met. And right here, on these 5 blocks, we have a meeting of about 5 or 6 cultures. It's the same idea. We've also worked in Egypt for a number of years on the new Grand Egyptian Museum as the content and exhibit designers. And in every project we do with our clients, we look for something unique. And the unique idea is we found the architect for this building, this enormous staircase, and we realized the one thing the Egyptians had never done was build the Great Pharaonic Hall of Fame. So there you have all the cartouches of all the pharaohs. And I think this is relevant to you. We designed this exhibition at the British Museum, which is the most successful exhibition they've ever had. And visitor research shows that visitors were enthralled by the atmosphere and touching something of the past, touching history. And I think what we're trying to do here is take the buildings of the Presidio and the Casa de la Guerra to that next level. And even more relevant to your project is what would seem to be a modest project for the historic royal palaces in the UK. Modest because it's not really a palace, it's the Kew Palace. It's where they banged up George III when he supposedly went mad. And this is an attic that was revealed. If you substitute Adobe for the paneling there and you use the use of sound and projections, we can take people back to another time. And this was the room where the princesses were all living in this dysfunctional family, and one princess out of 13 children produced a child called Victoria. Otherwise, we would have been a republic like you, there and then.
Darn.
So, this is my 5th trip here, and I just want to say this is the most fantastic city. And Jerry often says to me, but, you know, Istanbul, Stephen. And I say, look, Santa Barbara, you have a World Heritage Site here. Whether you have it or not, to go for World Heritage status at UNESCO, the area in the middle, that swathe all the way from the Mission down to the ocean is completely stunning. And I've been really taken by the whole story of the earthquake and how Pearl Chase and her friends conceived of this city after the earthquake. And in the very same year, 1925, Le Corbusier wanted to flatten half of Paris to build the city of tomorrow, which has become the model for cities all around the world. And I say to you, which would you rather have? It is a no-brainer. So it is a great privilege. And the site, what's so wonderful about the site is, of course, the way we have the two grids, as it were, meeting each other. The fort embedded in the Anglo city plan. So you can see immediately that there's one layer on top of another. We have a remarkable collection of buildings that have gradually been restored over years of archaeological research and scholarship. I think now is the time, with this critical mass and with the defence wall being nearly finished in large area, that we can now move on to try and understand what really happened in these spaces and what they might be like. So what's extraordinary is that in these 5 blocks, you have outside spaces in the pale colour, and you have buildings in the darker colour. And we're down here, and of course the space here is also very important. And each one is another story. In each of these spaces, something else happened, whether it was the meeting of the Spanish with the Chumash Indians, whether it was the Mexican period, whether it's particular stories of families that we know about. And the estate now includes Jimmy's Oriental Gardens there, the El Cartel here, and these 2 parts of the Presidio and the Casa here. And here you've got this fantastic story of the De la Guerra family, which really spans from the Spanish right through to the Anglo period. It's as if through one family you've got this great epic story. And let's just start with the site itself and the feeling of arriving. And one of the thoughts we've had is it would be really wonderful to know when you've arrived in the boundaries of the old Presidio, as I showed you on that plaque. And this is a very simple idea. A lot of our ideas are actually quite modest to execute. And it would be great to have we can't ever finish the whole Presidio, but it would be nice to put boundary markers at the entry points and at the corners. They pop up in a yard, they pop up in a car park, and on the top of each one of them to put a symbol, a crown, St. Barbara, a cannon, one of the symbols. It's the sort of thing that every time one of these buses goes by on the tour, you can point it out to them, and it's the sort of thing that you do with your children. You do a kind of I Spy. You're now entering the historic core. Simple thing, but it adds weight to the sense that people would have of what the whole core would have been. They also make nice souvenirs as well. Pencils you can sell in the shop. You have to think of these things. And then what happens next is that visitors will come to the Presidio and be given a map and a leaflet. And on the leaflet and map you will meet the characters who occupied this space. From Yananoli right through to Goykochea, through to Jimmy Chung. There's a vast array of characters who we know a lot about, and you will meet them in their spaces. When we did the Kew Palace, it wasn't just projections we did, we've used audio. So you go into a room, there's a chair, it happens to be the chair that Queen Charlotte died in, and we have this audio with a dramatist of her dying. It's very moving, very powerful, but what it does is it helps take people back in time. And I think audiences want to be moved, they want to go on a journey. Through this journey, they start to understand themselves and where they are. And we also think that it's not all a paid-for experience. When people walk by on the street, we should be able to tell them what they're looking at. Gradually now, we're starting to do the gardens at the rear, and the gardens in the style they would have been with the botanics of the period. So people will see all this. The historic rooms, the recreated spaces come later. And then we welcome people, and when we welcome them, there will be an archaeological zone, so they can see this is all based on archaeology and scholarship. Now, how do we create this sense of atmosphere? If you look at this fantastic photo of the Valenzuela family, they lived for 100 years in part of the adobe called El Cuartel of the Presidio. Now, you can see all the evidence here of how people lived. One of the problems with historic properties is they always look too clean and they always look too tidy. Nobody lived like that. You can see the bathtub, the tiles, all the stuff. You can never get your partner to clear the backyard. Nobody ever has done. And in a way, some of the spaces, we want them to be occupied. We want visitors to feel that the occupants have only just left the room or left the space. So in a way, the whole story becomes Once Upon a Time in California. And it's also, you're walking into a Ken Burns documentary. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So you're actually touching history in a much closer way. And so the Trust has acquired Jimmy's, which is, again, a wonderful story, because we can use it as a way of telling the whole story of the Chinese layer of occupation of these 5 blocks. And we've got all of this. Everything exists except the jukebox, which we'll have to get on eBay. And we can even do a little... we can even have a film of the barman showing how to make the famous flaming Mai Tais. And then the casa. Each of the outside spaces will also be interpreted. We want in parts of these spaces visitors to have a sense of how De La Guerra was running a business from there. And what was the business like and what was the space like? What were the kind of packages and the goods that came and left? So you can see a huge part of this is also an educative and a learning agenda. And we know from our museum work that, museums with text and panels, they appeal to only one quadrant of learning ability. Many of us learn through pictures, through films, through touch. We don't just learn through words. And you have to provide this full range of experiences to reach different learning styles. And if we don't have the original object, we make a sort of artsy version of it, and you have a chest, and the chest has all the stuff that might have been on it. Then, with the chapel, for example, we know that the priest married people there, and you can't quite see it with the lights of the room on, but let me just say we can use light and music in there, and we can do an AV, and we can put mats on the floor, and we can give you that sense of that atmosphere, of what it would have been like to take you back in time. And what was it really life like on this frontier? How did it happen? What was the nature of this relationship between the Chumash and the Spanish? What happened? What went on? And we can give people a sense of trying to imagine these rooms, the hardest thing, 200 years ago. And so we can use projections and other techniques in some spaces to convey that. And also and in other things, we can just say what the technology was, how things worked. And again, you see, this is just a first idea of a blacksmith space. Youngsters don't know much about horses or blacksmiths anymore at all. So there's a huge learning potential there. So I think what I want to say, just to sum all this up, is that this isn't all going to happen in one day. If it's taken 35, 40 years to get this far, this is over years. What we have to do is establish a few projects with some critical mass as soon as possible in the next few years. But my feeling is this, that as the interpreted spaces and rooms are rolled out over time, their reputation as a must-see destination and as a part of the whole tourist experience and visitor experience of Santa Barbara will precede them. I think we can take the Trust to a new level and make a richer contribution to the life of the city, the cultural life of the city, and more importantly to all our understandings of how diverse communities have made California, and then it remakes them. I think it will be unique. and I think it will be ranked with the best anywhere. Thank you.
That's it. That's good. No, it's very, very interesting. It's to bring history to life is just really important. And I've been to a lot of different places. You know, Salem in Illinois for Abraham Lincoln, and you go in there and you do have the feeling that somebody just left. I like that analogy. That's a good one. And I can see that we could use some of that in there. But we have lovingly gotten to the point of where we are right now. And we always talk about being at a crossroads in our history. I think we're just constantly at a crossroads, whatever that is. And we are concerned that we don't take the wrong road always. So I know we will go forward with these kinds of things very lovingly and very well, because that's just the way we are here. So, Mr. Horton, did you have something on there?
It's more of an observation than a question, Jerry, so you can relax. I first became involved with the trust in the 80s, and it really was my introduction to working in the city, because I had been at UCSB before that. And we are, all of us up here, very proud of our city, and for good reason. But this points to an aspect of our community that I think not many people are aware of. In the way that we have a symbiotic relationship with the state of California, the city, the nonprofits that are downtown, such as the Trust, and then the arts community and the finance community, all work together in our downtown here to provide an atmosphere and a working environment and an environment for our citizens, which is really greater than the sum of the parts. And I know from traveling around the state and out of state and on League of Cities business, when we talk about this kind of thing, other cities, I'm not saying no one has it, but most cities simply don't have that kind of cooperation that we have. And I think I certainly would point to the Trust as being a leader in developing this aspect for our community and in their interest in preserving history for our community. So thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. Ms. Falcone?
Well, thank you very much for a succinct yet very informative presentation. I appreciate it. I'm a New York City girl. Grew up wandering the wings, plural, of the Met and various other things, Natural History Museum. And one of the most interesting aspects, although it's the Metropolitan, it's all interesting, but one of the most interesting aspects is when you go back into the various different furniture wings and you get to see, not only the early colonial days, but then you also get to see the pioneer days. And it really is the interpretive information, what life was like, how you see them live. I took my late husband on a 4.5+ hour walking tour of the French Quarter in New Orleans when we went there a couple of years ago. And they have struck a really a very interesting balance that I hope that this city can continue to strike, because we have struck a very interesting balance between allowing the modern and the new to intermingle with and the redeveloped properties or the redone properties. I don't like to use the word development because that gets all hairy into some political nonsense, but the re-zutzed properties to live side by side with the older and the historically preserved. And I'm hoping that into the future, the city that I've come to love dearly can continue to strike that balance, because Santa Barbara, being a transplant, if you will, although it's been many decades, California is not particularly deep in layers. as you describe them. There are spots in California that are, and this is one of those unique spots in California that really has New England kind of layering on it. And the one thing that I've always been very cautious of and very concerned about, quite frankly, is that in order to preserve a particular moment in time, a moment in history, which is the Spanish colonial here, that we would lose sight of the other layers that have just as much importance, because after all, preservation of history is picking a moment, but you can just as easily pick another moment. The trick is to allow them, as you said, symbiotically, to live together and to tell a story of evolution. And I very much like what you've presented here because it doesn't involve any more demolishing of buildings, no matter what era they came from, or changing of particular sites to turn them back into something. And I appreciate that more than I can possibly convey up here and at this time. So wonderful job. Look forward to it. Of course, it's always about money, but at the end of the day, or in a few months, that'll be somebody else's decision to make. But I thank you very much for your work.
Ms. Schneider?
Thank you for that presentation, and congratulations on the recent grant this morning. That's good news to hear. When you mentioned World Heritage Site, my eyes opened up. I mean, I guess, of course, in some ways, but, you know, to bring up that high level of caliber for this kind of site, I think is appropriate and worthy looking at. I mean, the first place I looked at was the place I visited in Cambodia, at Angkor Wat, which is 1,100 years old. This is a little different, obviously, and Angkor is much larger with, you know, dozens of different temples, but still the stories behind it and just the heritage and the families and the connections that then you can bring up to present day is phenomenal. And I would encourage looking into that even more. I've always appreciated, especially when at Casa de la Guerra, when we can bring in current events into the site, but remember the heritage there. I'm thinking of the event that's coming up this weekend, but also when Old Spanish Days and the Native Daughters of the Golden West, when we present the next St. Barbara, and there's that event there, and people are in fiesta costumes, and and just trying to bring that place to life. It's always a fun place to go, and a reminder of our heritage as well. So I really look forward to Jimmy's as that's moving forward. I think that will really be an important piece of our history that I don't think people know very much about and should know more. And as you were mentioning, the connection between the Mexican-Spanish heritage and the Chumash and the history there, because there's a lot there that I don't think we've really talked about and discussed and honor as much as we could. So I appreciate the presentation and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Okay. We do have one speaker. Maybe I just remembered. My brain isn't here. Kate Smith, and then we'll get to the other people that would like to say something. Kate?
Madam Mayor, members of the Santa Barbara City Council, it's not about money. It's about inclination. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the Trust for Historic Preservation already puts on a wonderful Presidio Days. I've been with my children. All of the people are dressed up. There's a weaver. There's somebody, making tortillas. And it was a reenaction of what it might have been like hundreds of years ago. Isn't that true? Isn't that your group that puts that on? Okay, so now I begin. Trust for Historic Preservation is a local nonprofit with a small administrative staff and a large volunteer oversight board and a relatively small budget. The word trust is important. In God we trust. That's written on our money. But to manage our money, we have to trust our elected officials. We have to trust they will be wise and wonderful. What we know is that the nonprofits are doing the work of our government. They're doing the work for the people, and it's by the people. I ask that you slash your administrative government budget and that you turn over the work of the people to the nonprofit sector that does it with an inclination that is passionate. They're doing this out of love. I want to thank the Trust for Historic Preservation. Without them, the history of our community would be lost to large developers and for-profit corporations that don't care about the preservation of our heritage. They don't give a hooty toot who came before us, how the people lived. The Trust protects our history, the long story of humanity and community, and I thank them.
Thank you, Kate.
I would like to have one more minute. One more line. Could I have one more sentence?
Do it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would also like to mention that the Chumash were enslaved by our ancestors. They were forced to build many of the buildings. And the mural in our gorgeous courtroom shows that our ancestors came with guns to take the Chumash lands. And I ask that truth and justice be done, and that we recognize and acknowledge that.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. We don't have any other speakers. Mr. Williams.
Well, I just wanted to appreciate the Trust for willing to do something very different, and I think experiment with something that might make this vital to more people in the community, and I really appreciate that because it's already an incredible resource, but to always be ambitious in trying to bring more people and make it real to more people is a very great goal of the Trust, and I want to encourage that. I would only want to speak in favor of not glossing over the seedier side of the history of that area. I mean, it was in the late 1800s an area of several gunfights and other nefarious things that happened well into this century, and I think it would be something to make sure that we include, and I appreciate you trying to include really the tough subject of trying to illustrate the relationship between the Spanish and the Chumash. I think that's a difficult, obviously a difficult part of our history to talk about, but something that is really important for us to remember, so I think that's great.
Thank you, Mr. House.
Mr. Jackman, congratulations on your on this morning's accomplishment to get that grant. That's just fantastic. And which part? That's northwest corner, northwest wall. That's wonderful. If this ever were here for action, I wouldn't be able to speak because my store is in the middle of the parade ground of the old Presidio. So for me, it's a rare opportunity to be able to say something about this. And to metaphor, I think you're getting it right in the sense of to celebrate the life that's happened here and the wide variety, which continues today, the wide variety of perspectives that are represented, and not just through stages in history, but all mixed up together, which I think is the real magic of all of this. And I'm glad you mentioned the Chumash in your remarks. I think that pre-Columbian piece certainly is important for us, and we're trying to find more and more ways to celebrate that. I have the privilege of hearing the bell ring frequently from my store, and there's either a quinceañera or a wedding. I think it was a wedding just this weekend. It was just so wonderful, and the mariachi comes out, and it's just, you could be any time. I mean, it just takes you're right in it, and I want more people to experience that. I've had the privilege of seeing the different event, the special days that we're celebrating, and the spinning wheel and all the great things going on there. The thing that's disappointed me, and it remains so, that we don't have more people enjoying that on just a really day in and day out basis. The visitors to Santa Barbara have to find out somehow how precious and special this is, and the stories that can be told. And so I'm so hopeful for this approach, that it would really bring this to life and maybe even be more compelling to people, that they would come to Santa Barbara in quite larger numbers to see and enjoy. But then the last piece of this in the staff report It says the projects included in the master interpretive plan will offer the local community as well as visitors. And I think the local community here, for anything that we do in Santa Barbara, is appealing because it's authentic. And the authenticity of this is what I really read in it, and I really do appreciate that. So, again, one of my few chances to speak publicly from here on this. Thank you very much. I really am excited about it.
And I just wanted to put in that the World Heritage Site is very intriguing to me. I know we have that's through the UN, and it's a bunch of hoops. You don't just automatically get it, but it sounds very interesting. It sounds like something we ought to be exploring, I think. So I'd be willing. Of course, I'm going to be retiring, but so I'll have nothing else to do. So in January, but no, it sounds like a very interesting thing that we should be exploring, and who knows where it would lead. But I think thank you for mentioning that. Okay, anything that you would all like to add to this? I think it's so nice that you brought this here. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome to Santa Barbara. We don't often get an English gentleman here, so thank you for to our republic here. Thank you. Okay, item number 9, please.
Item number 9, funding allocation of the City of Santa Barbara Community Promotion Grants and contract with the City of Santa Barbara County Arts Commission for fiscal year 2010.
Okay. Ms.
Good
Brush,
afternoon,
go
Madam
ahead.
Mayor and council members. My name is Michelle DeCant with Community Development. On September 15th last week, we were before the Finance Committee with the City Arts Advisory Committee grant recommendations to have them forward to City Council. And this week, we're here before you, and Ginny Brush, the Executive Director of the County Arts Commission, will be making the presentation.
Okay, Ms. Brush.
Mayor Bloom and members of the council, thanks for the opportunity to make some general comments about this year's city arts and cultural grants. There were a total of 67 nonprofit arts grants requests this year. Staff, following up on the suggestions of the Finance Committee last year, made attendance at one of the technical workshops mandatory. This provided us with an opportunity to inform groups of the decrease in funding pools this year and provide guidance for grant requests and encourage partnerships and collaborations to increase access to the arts in communities and neighborhoods. Staff also added an additional workshop this year and scheduled one of those workshops after the workday to make attendance possible for those who couldn't get off work to attend one of the workshops. The Arts Commission's expanded website and weekly e-blast, our downloadable grant applications have all improved the process and I think increased awareness and access to the grants process. Additionally, staff encouraged first-time applicants to send a draft of their grant proposals in advance of the deadline for staff to provide input, and we also provided opportunities for actually any grant applicants to submit drafts for review and feedback prior to the deadline. The result was stronger grant applications in all categories. We know this from the feedback that we received from the grant review panels. For community arts grants, there were 23 applicants this year applying for grants from a pool of $54,475, with funding requests totaling $124,000. There were 4 first-time applicants in this category, and a number of those applicants we were pleased to see grew out of the Next Generation pilot program. There were also 3 applicants moving from other grant categories to apply in the area of community arts. In the organizational development category, there were 30 nonprofit organizations applying for $392,882 in grant requests for a total of the $167,000 that were available. One important trend I would like to note is that 5 of those organizations had moved from the events and festival category to request funds primarily for operating expenses. There were 14 nonprofits applying in the events and festivals grant from the $132,000 in available funds. Funding requests totaled $296,500, more than $164,500 than were funds available. As Michelle mentioned, the review committee met, and the recommendations were, the different review committees met on schedule, and their recommendations were approved by the City Arts Advisory in July 16th, with the finance hearing those recommendations on the 15th. Finally, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the arts community to thank the council for your recognition of the value that the role arts play in developing community and as a revenue generator for the city. Your continued funding support in these challenging economic times are critical to arts organizations already hit economically on all fronts, from private funders, from foundations, and the endowments they've come to rely on to offset their overhead and operating costs. I also want to commend the arts community and nonprofits for their adaptability, their creativity, their collaborations, finding new ways to share resources and leverage technology in order to continue to do more with less. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Any questions up here? We have two people who would like to speak. Mr. Horton, did you have a question? Okay. We have Karen Putnam from Art from the Heart. That's a great thing there. And, followed by Kate Smith. Thank you. Hi, Karen.
Hello, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm here to say thank you for your support of the arts. My name is Karen Putnam, and I have an educational program called Art from the Heart with the goal to encourage diverse expression of all ages through the arts. So if you're 6 months old, you may come. If you're 106, you may come. We dance, we do drama, we do music and literacy and visual arts. I offer multi-generational classes for children and schedule these classes in retirement homes with an invitation for everyone to participate at their own comfort level. Some are in chairs, some can see with their eyes, some see with their heart, some speak, some can't hold their head up. Everyone is invited to attend. In spring of 08 and 09, free multi-generational classes were offered in Santa Barbara, and they were funded in part by the Community Arts Grant Program. I was at a point where I was really losing hope about offering these classes financially, and the grant came available just at the right time and gave me the hope to offer these classes. And I would like to share just one experience of one class and invite you to attend. I arrive early with feather boas and music and instruments, paintbrushes, and a whole box filled with puppets, and I kind of gauge the participants that come in. I collaborated with Parks and Recreation and retirement homes and families to offer these classes for free. These bouncing teenagers arrived for this one class, 12, 13 years old, and I saw their energy, and I knew the energy we're walking into. I didn't know how it would work out, but it always does. We entered the locked door, and these residents are behind the locked door, not because they've done anything wrong, but just because they're not able to get out in the community. They're underserved, and it's a privilege to walk in there and be part of their lives. These children, I had them dance and do a little bit of movement outside so that some of the energy would be outside, and I watched this magical thing happen of the high energy of the children and the low energy of residents who could not hold their head up just blend perfectly together. Through the music and storytelling, they hooked up with different people, and then we take blankets and turn the laps of the residents into paint tarps, and everyone enters the paint zone. And the children, through the interaction of the music and the puppets and the drama, they're naturally connected with whoever they're supposed to be connected with. The residents naturally give them the encouragement they need. And these children take home the artwork, and hopefully they're taking home a memory, and hopefully more of this will happen in our community. I was one of the applicants for this year because I see this program grow, and I see hooking up artists and schools and teachers and making this more available for really underserved children who cannot afford it. So I'm here to say thank you. And I have a personal card for each one of you. It has a photo of the classes. It has your name on each card. So you can just get a little glimpse, but really you need to come. personally inviting each one of you to attend. I have a free class on October 12th, and you are all more than welcome to come. Remember that we get creative with paint, so keep that in mind as you get dressed for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to have somebody thank us for something like that. Very good. Thanks. Kate Smith, pass the card. I will do that. She said we had our names on it. Oh, yeah.
Madam Mayor, members of the Santa Barbara City Council, when I first came to Santa Barbara, I began to produce seasonal festivals. First, I got on the Kids World Board, and I designed and implemented the handprint tile for the fundraising effort. Then, as the head of the Friends of Kids World, I produced the Harvest Festival and Apple Fair. Hani Sonquist called it the best festival for children. And that's because it was not commercial. The songs and dances were traditional, and the arts and crafts were out of organic materials, and they were useful and treasurable. Dream catchers, applehead dolls, and Thanksgiving centerpieces out of organic materials. I then worked with Patrick Davis to produce a Winterfest, and then produced the Spring Festival and Flower Fair. I'm going to ask for a little time, a little extra time, because I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm not able to talk about my work without realizing that because I was gang raped by the school district and had to spend my entire fortune defending myself against their attack, the festivals were stopped. I became hated in this community, terribly misunderstood.
Kate, we're talking about arts grants, and you're almost done now.
Okay. Well, I'd like you to know that I am a professional grant writer and worked with the California Arts Commission when they started their private-public partnership.
Thank you.
I do need to state that our educational system has cut out arts education from their curriculum. This is the means for our society to go to hell in a handbasket. They cannot grow up to be poets, architects, dancers, musicians, anything without the ability to express themselves, the ability and the opportunity to express their thoughts, feelings, and observations. Dale Francisco is leaving because he doesn't want to hear me talk. He didn't go to the candidates'
you need to stop
forum.
right now, because that's not okay for you to attack one of us, and we need
I
to.
wasn't attacking. I was merely. He gets up and leaves. He didn't come to the city council forum. That was by a very potent community.
I understand, but we need to get moving on with our meeting here. We're not talking about anything that happened yesterday. We're talking about the arts grants, and so we have Roger Horton. Go ahead. I'm sure they were. Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say that the Finance Committee reviewed this and certainly agrees with. Wish we had more money, but we don't.
Absolutely.
And thought they did a great job. And then my last comment would be that most of our agenda today deals with the quality of life for our community in one form or another. Right. And this is one reason why it's sometimes at least a joy to be up here on council, is for the types of things that we've been hearing about today. Absolutely. And how that helps everyone in our community.
Absolutely. And we notice greater needs and less money, but that's kind of the mantra these days. But I think it's so wonderful that we were able to get the money that we did. $485,000 is a lot of money, and even though the need was much larger, but it's very good that we were able to do that. Go ahead, Mr. House.
I just want to appreciate Ms. Brush and and those who are involved in making these decisions and working cooperatively with the arts organizations. This is a tough time, and it requires the kind of willingness to be a little disappointed at the same time as recognizing how invaluable these small amounts of funds are. And when I look over this list and read what each one of the organizations is doing, I just have to say, thank goodness, thank goodness for them. And I think the challenge is there for the rest of us in the community to step up, to find an organization that we really believe in, to do what we can to participate or give funds if we possibly can, and just really help keep things going during this time. But to those who made these hard decisions and coming through finance with the recommendations, thank you very much, because that's a really hard job. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Schneider.
Thank you. And as I mentioned at Finance Committee, another added great benefit to these grants is that many of the programs involved work directly with at-risk youth, and it's a great piece of our ways of trying to prevent and intervene in terms of inappropriate behavior down the line, and giving kids opportunities that are positive and can lead to better choices into the future. And I was also very pleased to see that the continuation of some of the next generation grants now move on to the next level, because that was the point, I think, when the redevelopment agency started those grants in the area with at-risk youth. And to see them continue and be successful is really exciting. And then finally, we know that the arts community here is actually an economic engine for the city of Santa Barbara, and I think it's very appropriate to promote that and continue our heritage, not just for the big festivals, but for the little guys as well. So I appreciate that. I believe Mr. Horton has to, I was going to make a motion, but we have to split them up. Is that correct? Because you're on the board. Yes, so Mr. Horton's on the boards of both the Trust for Historic Preservation and City at Peace. So I'll move the everything but those two for now.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion about it? Mr.
Sure,
Williams, did you have something?
Sure. I just wanted to say that I do think this is an important investment. I agree with Councilmember Schneider that this is an important investment both in our youth and our culture and our economy by continuing to support these arts grants, and the effect that it creates in this community is both important for our community vitality, but also important for the bottom line of our economy.
Yeah, when you see this card that Karen Putnam just left up here, and see the faces on these older people and on younger people, and they're making connections, is really wonderful. Okay, we have a motion and a second, I believe. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then I'll move the grant to the Trust for Historic Preservation and City at Peace.
Second. I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, that's right. There you go. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ms. Brush.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to item 10, please. Mr. Limon.
Item number 10, introduction of Mills Act Historic Preservation Incentive Ordinance, including recommendations A and B that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara, amending chapter 22.22 of the municipal code to establish a process for historic property preservation contracts between the owners of city historic properties and the city pursuant to the authority of the State Mills Act, and adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara to adopt administrative rules and procedures for the implementation of the State Mills Act program.
Okay, Mr. Limon, the Mills Act.
Good afternoon, council members, Madam Mayor. Staff is very elated to come finally to this point in time where we're prepared to introduce a Mills Act program, introduction ordinance and program. I'm going to prepare some background information for you, or provide you with that background information to give you some indication of how the city has customized the Mills Act program to the city, and how we believe we've provided some caps in place to deal with potential fiscal revenue loss. I also will be providing you some information about the eligibility criteria for the program, what type of historic properties can qualify for this program. I would like to begin that, again, there is a long history associated with council direction on establishing incentives for historic properties and to develop a mechanism to encourage the designation of properties. Those discussions became very apparent when we reported back in 2002 that we were interested in surveying this entire city and providing additional potential historic districts available for designation. And at that time, there was a recognition that we would really need to provide some type of incentives to encourage these folks to come forward and support these types of historic district designations. Well, it's been some time since that first discussion, but during the course of the last several years, we've actually gone out and had discussions with other communities to try to get some information on how their programs are set up and to develop some of the mechanisms that we believe a pilot program could be established in the city without having a significant revenue loss. Back in July of 2007, we were actually here at City Council, and you directed us to pursue this Mills Act program. We returned in October 2007 and had the Finance Committee review the fiscal impacts, and they also provided some direction as far as how to set forth the program. And most recently this year, we were at the Ordinance Committee with actual ordinance draft to discuss how we could implement the ordinance into our Historic Structures Ordinance. But before I get into the today's discussion, I do want to provide the public some information about the State Mills Act. This act has been in place for quite some time. Other communities have adopted these Mills Act provisions that enables the city to enter into a contract with property owners to help preserve, maintain, and rehabilitate structures. This does require the county tax assessor to determine a reassessment of property values under an income method, which does result in a possible substantial reduction in property taxes. And the idea behind this State Mills Act is to have these property owners utilize these tax savings to improve their properties and to hopefully restore them to their grandeur. There are also provisions that allow the 10-year rehabilitation plans to include maintenance provisions, so the properties can just be kept in a good state of repair, which I think is the basis of what our ordinances require for designated properties. As I indicated today, earlier, many communities already participate in the program, so we know this is a tested sort of arrangement. There are some mechanisms that we have provided in our own program to deal with the possibility of noncompliance and monitoring, which are key elements that we've learned from other communities to make sure that we track this work that is associated with this contract arrangements. Again, with the adoption of today's administrative guidelines that we are adopting by resolution, it lays out some specific criteria on how the city will develop the process whereby the contracts are screened and ranked by using not only our urban historian to determine good candidates for these contracts, but also our Historic Landmarks Commission that participate and actually provide a recommendation that is necessary for our community development director to actually initiate and execute these contracts. So we believe we have a process that is going to be very efficient and should expedite these type of contract arrangements. We do have discussions ongoing with the county tax assessor also on the timing and coordination of these contracts. And hopefully if this ordinance is adopted next week, we actually have some candidates waiting, and we could possibly execute some by the end of the year. And that's what we're shooting for, hopefully. I'll give you some more basics of our program following. The pilot program, and the reason we're calling it a pilot program is that there are limitations and caps in place. We are determining specific qualification criteria for eligible properties. Those are focused on a specific type of historic property, and I'll get into that a little bit more later in slides that follow. But there's also a cap of 8 contracts per year. which can include 2 commercial properties. And we believe that those contract caps are necessary in order to try to limit the overall cost of the program. And the Finance Committee also agreed with that recommendation, and therefore that's included as part of this program. There's also a $300,000 max cap on the total revenue loss. We believe this is necessary not only to ensure that we have some fiscal responsibility, but also it establishes some limits initially on the program where we can come back and return to you and actually give you an update on how much revenue loss has in fact occurred based on how popular this program will be in the future. There is an assessment cap on each property, and I'll walk you through that. That there is some concern that some property owners may not qualify because of the valuation appraisal that they have on their current property. But we think we've targeted to the right type of project. There is a 10-year rehabilitation plan that is required with the application processing, and that's where we get into the nuts and bolts of what they're actually going to provide these monies for. And that'll be, again, scrutinized by our city urban historian. There is some staff time associated with that. Some of those staff time impacts do involve some staff initial review of the contracts and of the monitoring requirements, and that we think we've accounted for that initially. The program does this program is distinguished a little bit differently than other cities where these contracts are executed by City Council. We believed that in this particular instances, we have the oversight mechanism using our city urban historian and our Historic Landmarks Commission to allow these to be more efficiently processed through our community development director. So that's just something that's a little bit different for the city of Santa Barbara. And we have a contract application processing fee that we've requested that be part of the program application procedures and initial application. And again, we do have administrative guidelines that are being adopted today. The eligible properties within the city, there are currently 89 city landmarks, 123 structures of merit. And what we're anticipating is, in the future, adding some future historic districts that would amount to over 200 properties that could potentially be eligible for the program. Again, based on the valuation of their appraised value. And when you total up these properties, it's about 428 properties that we anticipate to be eligible if these historic districts gets eventually designated. There are some fiscal impacts. What we are estimating is initially the program, we estimate it to be in the neighborhood of $6,000 to $15,000 per year. And that's all based on these tax rate areas that we've had communication with the tax assessor's office that have indicated to us the proportion ratio of tax revenue that the city takes for these areas. And there are other taxing agencies that are impacted, affected. There will be a reduction in tax loss, but those agencies have been contacted, and they have not objected to this point based on the limited scope of our contracts that we're anticipating adopting per year. These tax areas, I'll just give you an example that the tax rate areas are based on the location within the city, so we have a pretty good idea of where these tax rate areas are with respect to the historic resources. Again, the staff impacts, initially what we anticipate is to be able to handle these processing of these applications, but as time goes on and the program might become more popular, we're suggesting that we continue to monitor it and come back to you in 3 years. That's part of our recommendation today, to give you an update on exactly how much time we're taking for this program, for staff to monitor and to process these applications, and also give you an indication of the tax revenue loss up to this point, so we can see if our estimates are clear and precise. There are some program benefits related to this program, and the primary benefit, again, is to offer an incentive for designation of historic properties. As Mr. Jacobus is quite aware, sometimes it's very difficult for property owners to agree to these designations, and we believe this is an incentive that's going to be useful to that endeavor. The properties in need of repair, rehabilitation, and maintenance have this funding tool available. If we have a property that is falling into disrepair and that there's a potential for a restoration project, this program could be very beneficial to get that property up to a repair level that we feel is appropriate with the significance of that structure. And therefore, we believe that our review process will target certain types of properties for these contracts that will be beneficial. And hopefully we'll have some success stories to report back to you in 3 years to tell you exactly how these contracts are working in improving these structures. One of the benefits of this ordinance is that we have a new definition for a historic district in our ordinance. It's very rare that a community with our reputation didn't have a historic district definition. We have a landmark district, which is what our El Pueblo Viejo district is, but we wanted to distinguish what a historic district was, which is a little bit different than our landmark district. And then we believe that this program does tie into the city's preservation and sustainability goals to actually keep these older homes in use and preserve them to be, in the community. And finally, I did want to mention to you that we did also include at the ordinance committee other incentives that we're considering bringing back to the ordinance committee, dealing with zoning relief and code relief. That what we're finding when we have discussions with these property owners is that they are really in a dilemma when they have to legalize or convert their uses to the zoning that's allowed for the property, and the ramifications of providing parking and having to deal with all the code requirements that come forward. And we believe that we can provide some additional guidance and incentives in that area, and we hope to hopefully come back to the ordinance in the future to also deal with those incentives. That concludes my presentation, and we're here available for questions if you have any. Thank you.
I wanted to note that there's an attachment on our in our report, but it's a one-pager front and back on questions and answers about the Mills Act. And is this going to be available to people who might be interested?
Yes, Madam Mayor. That just to give you an outline of, there is some background material that we prepared. We actually have a full application packet that will be helpful for applicants to understand how to apply and what's necessary to make the application. And this is an excerpt of that package that gives people a quick understanding of the city's program.
Because it was very well done.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing that. Ms. Schneider, do you have something?
A question. You mentioned something that made me think of it. First off, this is great that it's finally here. One of the questions you mentioned, there's going to be a certain number or cap of numbers of applications that we can move forward, but sometimes things happen going through HLC at a property where it's discussed where perhaps this should be designated as a structure of merit or landmark, and as you mentioned, maybe there's some squirreliness about it because of the cost behind it. Would those properties, since they're going through a review process, be pushed up towards the front of the list or something so they can get the incentive since they're already going through some other improvements? What happens if you've already reached your max for that year?
Right.
Can you expand on that
Sure.
a little bit? Mm-hmm.
Councilman Snyder and Madam Mayor, the questions have been brought forward about what happens if we get 30 applications, and what does that do as far as the waiting list for future subsequent years. That definitely is a possibility. We have this criteria that we believe will screen properties out and give priority to projects that we believe are the most beneficial that could be used in conjunction with this program. In other words, that if we know there's an active rehabilitation program or a project that's in the works, that may receive additional priority for designation if we have a contract that we can offer for that. So I know Mr. Jacobus is working with our Historic Landmarks Designation Subcommittee to establish a priority list for designations, and we could develop some additional prioritization for these types of projects to allow the designation to come forward up the priority list so we can accomplish this.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
So this is a program that essentially applicants come to us. We're not going to go out and try to recruit properties into this program.
That's correct, Councilmember Williams. We feel it's a tool when we deal with designations But of course, as the program gets more well known, we've actually put together a Inside Santa Barbara piece already to inform the general public about what it is. We are getting current inquiries. Mr. Jacobus is familiar with some of the inquiries already received, and we sort of have to determine if there really are candidates for this program. And
I know. I have one of them at my church that bugs me all the time, and I love it. But I guess my question is the sort of opposite danger to what Councilmember Schneider just talked about. What's to stop the 8 most expensive properties from coming forth in the first year? I've just tried to, like, we could take a $300,000 loss, but we couldn't take it next year or probably the year after. So I'm just trying to get my head around, how long would it take to get to that point? And of course, I love the mechanism because we want to preserve these properties and we want to have the ability to clean up some of these properties. But I just am hoping the fiscal impact is measured and happens gradually. So can you maybe answer that a little
Yes, Councilmember Williams, Madam Mayor. There are some variables involved in estimating the impacts, the initial fiscal loss impacts. And the variables involved, we don't know which properties will come in and ask for these contracts arrangements. Obviously, if we have properties that have lower appraised value, we'll be able to not suffer the amount of loss in revenue impact. But if we get properties that are more highly valued and appraised, then there is a larger loss, and that $300,000 cap will be utilized much quicker. There are folks in the community that feel that we've set caps too low, that we're not allowing properties that are valued higher to be part of this program. But our philosophy is not necessarily geared towards the more expensive property. It's geared towards a reasonable amount of home value that we believe will maximize the benefits of this program. Jay can also comment on the inquiries that we've gotten to date to give you an idea of who's interested.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, I've had 3 or 4 people that have called me with that very situation. My house is worth $2 million, $3 million or something. Why am I being exempted? I simply tell them, the type of property we're looking for. If you look at Santa Barbara's west side, you've got an amazing collection of Victorian era buildings over there that are often forgotten about because they're several blocks off of State Street. They're oftentimes hidden behind trees, and many of them, quite frankly, are in a state of very bad disrepair. And so people don't realize how valuable those buildings are because they're not seeing them in their full glory, so to speak. So, these are the people we're reaching out for that we're hoping that are going to be able to take advantage of this program. Somebody that's got a home that, everybody knows it's very expensive to buy in Santa Barbara, and you've heard the term house poor. You've got somebody with $1 million house and they haven't got 2 nickels to rub together. So we're looking for people that have this, maybe it's $1 million Victorian, needs work, and this is the program that's going to help them to do the maintenance, the restoration, and the repairs that they need to do to keep the house, in good shape, and so we can keep it for future generations. The other thing that I need to point out is that for the general public is that just because you have an old house doesn't mean you're automatically going to qualify for the program. That's not what it's about. It's about preserving, our architectural jewels that a few more years from now are not going to be salvageable. We need to catch as many of them now as we can, and hopefully we will get a number, get our quota of 8 will be these smaller properties so that we can continue the program on for a number of years, which is what we intend to do.
As usual, Jake, your information and zealousness persuade me from having any doubts whatsoever.
There you go. Could you stick around a little more? Maybe we could have them here all the time. Mrs. Falcone and then Mr. Horton.
Well, first of all, I know that this
Couple
came
people
to...
too. We've got a couple people from the public too, so we're still
Questions?
doing questioning. Yeah.
I apologize for missing the Finance Committee last week. I was attending the League of California Cities annual conference in San Jose, so I could have probably gotten a couple of these questions answered at that time. But if you would do me a favor and help me get my head around these numbers a little bit more, and sort of talk to me like I'm 6, okay? There's $300,000 as a cap. Is that per year, or is that for the entire program? The entire program.
That's correct, Councilwoman Falcone.
Now, that is a loss to us for however many years it takes to accumulate and get to that cap. That's a loss in property tax to the city. There's a corresponding loss to the county, as if the county were to devalue a property or value it. It's not just a city to our a loss to our 1%. There's also a loss to the county's corresponding whatever it is they get, 1.5% or whatever it is.
That's correct, Councilman Falcone. I actually have some hypothetical scenarios of how the methods are used to calculate these revised appraised values, and there are some difficulties sometimes in estimating what those actual savings will be. That's why we need to actually have these calculated by the tax assessor. But in a nutshell, the city does not get the entirely 1% of the property value. Obviously,
are we keeping the county whole under this program?
Yes.
There it is.
The range in the tax rate areas is anywhere from 9 to 17% of the 1%.
All that. Mm-hmm.
And to be frank, the school districts are the most impacted. They get the larger majority of the tax revenue. And we've had conversations with them, and they're aware of that. There will be a revenue loss to them as well. And to this point, they were not as concerned because of the maximum number of contracts. If we had no cap on the number of contracts, they would be possibly here objecting to this. So we believe that those mechanisms will allow us to not reach that cap as quick as otherwise.
And that is having the lower income properties come in, or I don't know quite how you say this. The older. Is there an amount? Is there a value that you've treated? Because the $300,000 max program is self-imposed.
Right.
Is there a threshold after which, and this goes to Mr. Williams' question, a threshold after which, in terms of value, that you can't come in?
Yes.
Have you set that actually?
To the degree that we're going to monitor the program, there could be a point where we have to return back to City Council and ask you to either stop these contracts from being renewed.
So we haven't enunciated that
value. We have
yet.
not.
Okay,
that we are going to be coming back in 3 years to give you an idea of where we are with the revenue lost to the program. As it relates to the cap. So we would make a judgment whether or not we need to supplement or increase that cap to maintain these contracts or gradually phase them out.
Okay, so the opportunity to modify down the road does exist.
Right. The council will adopt these rules and regulations by resolution. So we've actually taken them out of the ordinance to
Not
make
any
sure
given Tuesday.
you can modify them and change
Somebody
them as.
can.
Yes.
The last thing I have goes to Mr. Williams' question, and that has to do with the voluntary, involuntary nature of the program, which I'm for the program, don't get me wrong. I'm just asking a bunch of questions to be very clear about consequences, because there will be some unintended consequences that people don't know about until we start getting into the program. And then, as one of my former colleagues used to say, the snakes start crawling out, from underneath the rocks. If we are going to limit the value to some degree, whether enunciated or not, and we are looking to preserve the jewels that are not going to be salvageable in 3 to 5 years, how are we not going to go out and seek those out? We're going to wait for those folks to come in to us? There's things that make you go,
Councilman, Unlike other cities, some communities have chosen to put a lower appraised value. Let's say, for example, Los Angeles, $500,000, and in order to waive that, they actually have to come to the city council to get a higher increased value. That gives them flexibility for when a project that's worth $3 million to actually make a decision to pursue a contract. We didn't feel that was appropriate for this community, that we didn't want to have to come to the city council every time. And we actually are targeting these lower valued properties, and there may be some unintended consequences, that there might be some jewels out there that really need it, that we could develop that exemption mechanism if you so choose.
Okay, so you're going to target, but it's still going to be voluntary.
That's correct.
Okie doke. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Horton, and then we have two people.
Yeah, just the staff report, page 5, is estimated that the impact on the city, this is back to Dawes' question, in the range of 6 to 15K per year, depending on, of course, on the properties that are approved. But, I sort of wear two hats on this one, being chair of finance and then also wanting to preserve the historical aspects of our town. And it seemed to me that the benefits to the neighborhood and to the community were well offset by the benefits of this program and the very modest amount of taxes we would lose. I would like the opportunity to make the motion when it's appropriate.
Sure. No, don't blame you. Okay, we have Kellum DeForest, who will be followed by Louise Boucher. Mr. DeForest.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And congratulations. It's about time. We've been waiting for a long time for this. And I know Councilman Roger Horton has been working on this since he became a city councilman. So thank you, Roger. And I think this would be great definitely needed for historic preservation. Why did it take from 1972 to 2009? I don't know, but we are at last getting there. The Mills Act, as recorded in the Government Code Section 50281, reads as follows: for the preservation of the qualified historical property and when necessary to restore and rehabilitate the property. I would like to see, I think the people that have done something to or tried to restore their properties, especially ones in the areas that you quote, the west side, are not too expensive properties, they should be rewarded. They should be able to take place in this program. And that is why the words "when necessary" are in the California Government Code. So please consider that. And I sent an email to you about possibly rewording that section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise Boucher.
Good afternoon, Louise Boucher. This is a great day. I am so pleased to see this happening. The Landmarks Commission is unanimous in their desire to have this, and it makes me feel good to have Santa Barbara join other communities who have gone before us with this. We may be a little late, but I'm certainly hoping that this will take place and we can all be very proud. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Williams and then Mr. Horton. We're going to let Mr. Horton make the motion.
Yeah, I'm not going to make the motion. I'm not going to do that.
Just thought I'd straighten it out right away.
He's been waiting for decades. I haven't been waiting as many decades as Mr. Horton has been for this. So I did want to ask to Mr. DeForest's point. I understand that that essentially you can use the funds to upkeep those properties, but are you talking about previous repairs that were done in years before being somehow included? And I guess I don't understand how we could know years ago which ones were included and how we could reward sort of post facto, or are you talking about in advance? And I guess it's a question for Mr. DeForest or for staff, if either one is ready to answer that question.
Yeah, Mr. Lamont.
Councilman Williams, Madam Mayor, I think I can elaborate because I did receive the email message from Mr. DeForest, and what I attempted to do in a reply was to explain that although there is a difference in language between the government code and our ordinance draft, it in no way implies that restoration projects will be given more priority than maintenance projects. But what we can't do is go back in time and reward folks who own landmarks and give them these tax breaks for work that they've already completed. We are looking forward. There is a requirement for a 10-year maintenance plan, and that 10-year maintenance plan looks into the future and targets those improvements in the future. So it's a question of whether you agree our ordinance should match the state government code and emphasize maintenance versus restoration.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horton.
I have the great pleasure of moving item 10, recommendations A, B, and C.
Second, as I've been here for the 8 years as well.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that we understand that this is a pilot program and that we'll be watching it. The concern for me is the cost for a very strapped budget right now. But is it 9,000 to 15,000? 6 to 15, thank you, is not a huge number at all. And I think a community that honors its history is one that will remain viable in the future. So I think it's really important to do that. But I do think that we're going to, we should watch. And is this coming out of unappropriated reserves? Is that what we're doing? Do you know? And if we don't know, it's okay. We'll find out. We'll find out. But that may be where it has to come out of. I should have asked that before.
Madam Mayor, members of council, it would not come out of the reserves because it's not an upfront cost to us. It would just be that we would get less revenue in the future, and so therefore we would have to adjust our expenditures to reflect that or find another source.
Sure, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I just wasn't tracking there. Okay, anybody else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
wait, Mr. Jacobus.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, hopefully in 3 years we'll be out of this fiscal crunch that we're in.
Right.
And this will be such a small amount of money that it won't be an issue. And also, I just wanted to follow up on something that we glossed on before, was how are we going to identify the properties? The city is in the process of surveying different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And during those surveys, that's an opportunity to be able to find where these houses are. And we can actually perhaps have a part of the form where we would maybe look for possible candidates as we're doing the surveys. So there will be times when we'll be going through these neighborhoods and we may be able to help identify. It doesn't mean we're going to necessarily knock on someone's door, but when people start saying, well, why do you want to put my house on the potential list, then we've got this package of goodies that we might be able to offer them to make it a good incentive for them. So
I think a lot of people just don't know, even though they've purchased the house, they might not know that much about it. So that's a very good thing that we're doing some outreach.
You would be amazed how many people that I deal with that, my house is historic. It's like, it was only built in 1928, but, it's a significant architect and particular good characteristics for its architectural period. So, it's amazing how many people don't know.
No, it's very good program. Okay, all those in favor, please. Oh, you wanted to say something? Sorry, Mr. House.
I hate to get in the way of it all, but I just want to say
you did a good
this
job.
is not just a cost. This is an investment. That what Mr. Horton said, I believe firmly to be true. When a city takes its history this kind of seriously, and when in fact you have the improvements in neighborhoods, it benefits the adjoining property owners. And I can't imagine how this would ultimately be a cost to us. I can only see it being a benefit, and not just qualitative as well. I think financially.
Okay. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you so much, and thanks for getting this one done before Mr. Horton is out of here. Okay. I don't think we have anything else. Did you, Mr. Jacoby? Did you have something you wanted to say?
I was just going to say something as a point of interest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, historic and heritage tourism is the fastest growing segment of the tourism industry currently. And if we can get the ability to, be prepared for that influx, that's just all the better for the city. And this kind of goes sort of hand in hand with what they want to do with the Presidio, to make it more interesting for people coming from out of town.
Well, I think it'd be very interesting to work on that World Heritage Site, as I said before. That's an intriguing notion. Okay, thank you very much, and we're adjourned. It wasn't quite a